Welcome to My Life After. I'm your host, Steve Joseph. Today's guest is a true legend, a man who helped define professional wrestling in the 1980s and 90s. If you grew up in the 80s, chances are you or someone in your family have seen him in the ring with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Andre the Giant. But behind the fame, the crowds, and the championship belts, Tito Santana found something most wrestlers never did: peace after the spotlight. When his days in the WWE ended, Tito didn't spiral downward like some of his peers, who oftentimes ended up in the tabloids. Instead, he traded the roar of the arena for the halls of a high school, becoming a teacher, a coach, mentoring and guiding his students and athletes to be better versions of themselves. This is My Life After Wrestling with WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana. Well, we can roll?
Let's do it.
Okay, excellent. So, Tito, it's an honor to have you here with me in the studio and on this podcast. I've been telling all my friends and family for weeks about Tito Santana, and actually, my friend Dominic went out and got me this. This is your first action figure that came out in the 80s, right, when you were Tito Santana.
That was the original one.
That's right, the LJN one. So thank you to Dominic for getting this for me. Can you tell me about your early life, what shaped you growing up, and how you first fell in love with wrestling?
We were migrant workers in South Texas, a little town by the name of Mission, Texas. And I didn't really go to school full time until I was a freshman in high school. And uh, it was my eighth grade coach or gym teacher who taught me into becoming an athlete my freshman year. Went out for football, and I ended up playing football, basketball, and did some track. And I wasn't a wrestling fan because in Mission, wrestling didn't come on till real late, and I just wasn't a wrestling fan. I went to West Texas State to play football, and I met Tully Blanchard. Tully Blanchard's father was the promoter in San Antonio in South Texas, and they are the ones that started talking to me and planted the seed of becoming a professional wrestler, which I was not interested because my junior year I started getting, letters from the NFL. So I thought I was going to be drafted. Well, I ended up signing with the Kansas City Chiefs as a free agent. And I was there for a while, and then I got cut, and then I went to Canada, played for the BC Lions. And after I played for the BC Lions, I told Tully, as Tully had one more year after I left. So I told Tully, I said, when I get done playing this season with the BC Lions, when I come back, I'd like to give wrestling a shot. So both of us, I remember we got Tampa, Florida, January the 1st, 1977. And I had to learn how to crawl, how to walk, and then how to run. And I had to learn everything. And it was a little tough at the beginning, but I had another friend, uh, God, Terry Funk and Dory
I
Funk.
remember him. Yeah.
They also went to West Texas State. There was a lot of guys that went to West Texas State.
I actually wanted to ask you a bit because, I'm based in Canada. I'm based in Toronto. The whole country is very, very happy that the Toronto Blue Jays are in the World Series against the LA Dodgers. And the Canadian connection with the BC Lions, great football team. How was your time in Canada? Was there anything that really stood out for you with your time and life in Canada?
Well, being a Mexican American, growing up in South Texas, there was a lot of racist people, and there still are, everywhere. My experience in Canada, I mean, when I went to Vancouver, I'd see white and black couples mixed, and nobody would think anything of it. And they treated me great. I had a great experience in Vancouver. As a matter of fact, I went back to Vancouver a few months ago with Gary Poole. He helps some organization over there and had a great time. And, they had a great wrestling federation and they had some great matches. And I think I'm going back in April.
And actually, there's another great or famous wrestler who also played in the CFL, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, as well. He played for the Calgary Stampeders a
Yeah,
long
yeah,
time ago.
he was there. I don't think he was there very long, but he was there for a little while. Yeah.
So you transitioned to wrestling, and back then it must have been quite a grind to get into the circuit. And before the WWF, which is now the WWE, existed, it was just multiple small wrestling circuits throughout the country that you had to kind of break into, and then they were eventually nationalized and merged when the McMahon family took over. Right? Can you give us a bit of background on that and how you got into that whole circuit and ended up in the WWF, which is now the WWE?
Well, it was that we used to call them territories. And I started out in the Florida territory in Tampa. Eddie Graham was the owner of that territory. I was there. I trained with Hiro Matsuda. Uh, According to Hulk Hogan, he trained Hulk Hogan and broke his leg. I never knew anything about that, but it's what the saying goes. Anyway, I ended up having 4 matches in Florida. Like I said, I had to learn how to crawl. So all of a sudden, uh, Jim Barnett was the owner of Georgia Championship Wrestling, and he had part ownership of Florida. And he kind of, I guess, he liked me because I was on TV one week, and I guess he saw me. And before you know it, I'm on my way to Atlanta, Georgia, and they promised me that they were going to push me. I had 4 matches when I got to Atlanta, Georgia, and I found wrestling very difficult to learn. It was not easy for me to learn the trade. It took me it took me a couple of good years to feel comfortable, and the reason I learned it that fast is because every night that I was wrestling with guys that were better than me. That every time I went into the ring, I was being taught by guys that were better than me with more experience, and I just listened to the guys and did what they asked me to do.
When did you realize that you had made it in wrestling? What was that moment? What was that feeling like?
Well, I had a hard start. I went to Georgia. They promised me they were going to do something with me. I knew I wasn't ready. Then I was there about 10 months. Then from there, I went to Charlotte, and by that time, I had been wrestling for 10 months, and I was getting a little better. They started using me a little better with the Crockett promotion in Charlotte. And then from there, I went to Texas, Amarillo territory, the northern part of the state. And Blackjack Mulligan and God, Dick Murdoch bought the territory. And they made me a promise they're going to make me an international star. Well, that didn't happen. So I wasn't doing good at all there in Texas. The trips were very long and not making any money. And Andre the Giant comes by, and I had become friends with Andre the Giant, and I didn't know that he did this, but Mario Savoldi was also working in the office in Texas, and he saw that I was getting screwed. So between the two of them, they got some tape, and Andre was on his way to New York, and Andre showed the tape to Vince McMahon Sr. And before you know it, I'm on my way to New York a few days later. When did I find out I made it? The day that I stepped into Madison Square Garden and had my first match in Madison Square Garden in front of 20-something thousand people.
That's amazing. I remember Gorilla Monsoon would always say mass pandemonium whenever, the crowds go wild and things go crazy. One of the things about wrestling in the 80s and as we knew at WWF was those glory days, which included you, which included Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat and those guys. What were they like? So you mentioned Andre. We could start with him. He seems, from what I've heard, reading things, quite a generous guy. He definitely liked to drink. I read he drank like 112 beers one time in one sitting at a bar in Pennsylvania. Like, he was a big dude, right? I'm sure you it barely touched him. What was Andre like? What was Hogan like? And
Well,
during that era.
Andre was, Andre, if he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, he let you know. He treated some guys pretty horrible in the ring, like Big John Studd and Macho Man Randy Savage. Even the Ultimate Warrior, he wasn't very nice to the Ultimate Warrior. Hulk Hogan and I started together. He was a little bit behind me. We went to New York together, and we were both wet behind the ears. We were just both getting started when we got to New York. As a matter of fact, we wrestled against each other, and at that time, it takes you a while to be able to work on top and draw money. You have to learn how to work in the ring, and then you have to learn how to do the promos. And I don't know if you remember Mad Dog Vachon. Mad Dog Vachon was from Montreal, great performer, and he used to tell me interviews are 90%, and the wrestling is actually only 10%. So you had to master the interviews. That's where you sold the tickets, when you created the feuds between you and your opponents. I kind of helped Hulk a little bit when we went to Japan together. He got to Japan. He says, uh, he used to call me Ariba. He said, Ariba, what should I do here? And I said, Hulk. I said, and I was pretty green in Japan too. And I said, I don't know, Hulk. You're a big guy. What I see from the big guys, they just go in there and just beat the crap out of the Japanese wrestlers, and that's how they get over. And that's what he did. He went in, and Hulk was 320 pounds, and he just beat the crap out of the guys, and he got over in Japan. Him and I went from Japan. We went to the AWA to work for Vern Gagne, but before he got to the AWA, he went to L.A. to do the movie with Sylvester Stallone. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah, Rocky 3 it was, right?
Rocky Three, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thunderlips, that was his
right,
character's name. He was a heel in that one, which for the audience, heel is like a villain in wrestling, right?
right. And when he was done with the movie, he came back to the AWA, to Minnesota. Then we were based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Vern Gagne tried to make him a heel, and he had Johnny Valiant managing him, and they would throw two guys against Hulk Hogan, and Hulk would go out there with the robe that he used in the movie, and they wanted to make him a heel, and the fans just kept cheering him on, and they fired Johnny Valiant, and Hulk Hogan was turned into a baby face, and you know I was pretty much in the same territory with Hulk Hogan the rest of my career. And because I was in the same territory, the territory was always doing good business. And I ended up making good money the rest of my, 12, 13 years in the business, because I was wrestling in the same territory Hulk was. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, very much so. We lost him this year, and he definitely was. I think you were great, Tito, but in when people think of wrestling, they think of Hulk Hogan first. Do you think wrestling would have been the same as we know it now had it not been for Hulk Hogan and the persona that he created?
No, me and I've heard other, veterans that have talked about this. At the time, Hulk Hogan was the only one who could have pulled it out. The guy was a monstrous figure with charisma coming out of the yin yang, and and he just caught on. he just got over like $1 million. Before you know it, all the big buildings in Minnesota that never happened were selling out. And then they brought him in and put the belt on him. He beat the Iron Sheik in, I think, 30 seconds or something like that. And the guy got over immediately, and the fans just loved him.
Yeah, he
I
really had.
excuse me. I call him or consider him the Elvis of professional wrestling.
That's
He
that's a good, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
yeah.
He definitely had a lot of charisma, or as the young kids now say, my daughter's gonna kill me, but Riz, right? They say, oh, that guy's got a lot of Riz. But he definitely had that. I remember when King Kong Bundy, body slammed him several times and broke his ribs. As a kid, that was the first time I cried. Right, I'm
Uh,
watching the main event with my dad, and I'm like, oh, and it was perfectly cued. It was the first time that song "Real American" came out, and there was this big music video, and I'm thinking, oh, how could this not be staged now as an adult, right? But I wanted to ask you that because everyone talks about wrestling, and there is, obviously a certain part of theatrics to it, but you did really have to train in terms of wrestling, maybe not Olympic Greco wrestling, but you did have to have an athletic skill to it. And then how did matches unfold? Did they give you a script and say, hey, you win tonight, you lose tonight? Or how do you decide who wins and loses?
well, no, Vince McMahon, the promoters used to decide, who they thought could draw money, and they'd give you the finish. They tell you what you're going to do at the end. The rest of the match, we used to ad lib, and we just would go to the flow. You get to the point, and Mr. Fuji used to tell me, he says, Tito San, he says, you got to listen to the people. The people tell you what they want. It's all about timing. And I used to say to myself, timing? I can tell you, look at my watch and tell you what time it is. What do you mean, listen to the people? The people tell you what to do. Well, it's true. I was wrestling him in Wildwood, and he had me in a hole, and all of a sudden he tells me, bring your arm up, start shaking it. And the people started screaming, and he says, shake it louder. And they started screaming louder. He says, get on your knees. And every move that he was telling me to do, the noise got louder. And then after the match, he says, did you listen to the people? And that was the first time that I really heard the people. And that was a great learning experience that I had with Mr. Fuji in the ring. The promoters knew who could draw money. And back then, if you were a kid, everybody was a good wrestler. Everybody was talented. Everybody could talk on the mic. Everybody could sell tickets. Vince McMahon decided he was going to push. When he started building, for towards the WrestleManias, I think it's what he did. He went and got me as the best Mexican wrestler out there. He went and got Jay White, Junkyard Dog, as the best black. He got the first time that a white guy had been, his big superstar that with charisma coming out of the Yang Yang. And he went out and got the best talent, from everywhere. You'd get in the ring, and, the fans were there, and, the fans were going crazy, every night. Business was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, that it definitely was a massive brand. There was, t-shirts, cups, toys, dolls, like it definitely peaked.
Cartoons.
Cartoons, yeah, cartoons, and also the albums, music albums and everything. Just
Yeah.
anything that they could commercialize, they did, and it peaked, or it gained its fame and popularity just at the right time. I actually stopped watching wrestling probably around the mid 90s or so. It started taking a different direction, and I was off to university. I didn't have time to sit and watch stuff on weekends
Uh-huh.
and things like that, but definitely did enjoy that era. Now, when did you realize it was time to hang up the boots, so to speak, with wrestling, and choose a different path? And one of the reasons that I really actually wanted to talk to you was wrestling is just it, we see what it did to a lot of people. It's hard on the body, hard on the mind, hard on the soul. You see a lot of guys that get into drugs and alcohol, their body painkillers, their body's taking a beating. I remember watching a documentary with Jake the Snake, and he was wrestling in community center halls, and the bathroom, the urinal was just a garbage can that all of them would just use out in the open. I felt so bad for these guys that had such fame and popularity, and then they were just relegated to just that, pretty much living out of a car, some of them, and trying to scrape a life by. When did you know that you needed to change from wrestling? Your time was done, and you chose a very different path. And what made you choose that path?
Well, it was in 1993, and you're right. I mean, we a lot of the fans don't know this, but the real fans know this. Uh, in 1993, I gave it up because we had been working for 350 days a year. It was very hard on your marriage, your family. You miss all kind of anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas. We were entertaining. New Year's Eve, we were entertaining. Thanksgiving, we were entertaining the fans. All the holidays, we were entertaining and away from home. And uh, I had a great run with the WWF. As a matter of fact, Hogan and I are the only two wrestlers who were on the first 9 WrestleManias. So I had a great run myself. But, Vince had stopped using me, uh, as good as I wanted to be used. And I was, just doing a little bit better than breaking even. And I just thought to myself, it's just not worth being on the road anymore. So in 1983, I gave him my notice, and uh, my wife is the one that when I was in college, I got my degree in 4 years, and I had a teaching degree, physical education and Spanish double major. And my wife kept saying, "Why don't you teach? Why don't you teach?" And I just said to myself, I don't know that I want you guys to keep living the way you're used to, because I put them in a pretty good lifestyle. And so I said, let me give it a try. So I started subbing, and I ended up enjoying it. And, that was the best thing I ever did, going to teaching. I taught for 26 years, and now I have a nice teacher's pension, of course, Social Security. And, I my wife and we opened up a hair salon, and my wife did a great job. She didn't cut hair, but we had a hair salon for 25 years, and we got rid of it. And then I retired. We pretty much both retired at the same time. And thank God, I knock on wood, my wife and I are doing pretty good.
That's a great story. I remember when I was researching ahead of the show, I was just looking things up on you, and I came across a Reddit post where they were talking about you as a high school teacher, and so many people mentioned that it was the highlight of their high school career and such a privilege to be your student. They just spoke volumes about you and how great you were, and what an inspiration you were in their life. So I think a lot of those kids are grateful for you for going and choosing that path, and good on you. It's really hard to leave that glitz and glamour when you're used to it, and drawing a crowd and all the attention. For some people, it's addictive, and I can see at some point too, if you are very family focused, you can just get you miss all the birthdays, as you said, you miss all the anniversaries and Christmas dinners, and you want that back in your life. So good on you to move towards that. When you look back on your legacy, not just in wrestling but in life, how do you hope people will remember you and what you did?
Well, I think I told you it was my eighth grade coach. His name was Luis Sanchez in Mission that got me started into sports. And because of sports, I told you we were migrants also. I wouldn't have been able. I was the only one in my family that went to college. So because of him, I feel that I owe it all to him. I ended up getting a scholarship, and then one thing led to another. So I figured he made a big difference in my life. And I just thought to myself, the reason I went into teaching is because I said, I want to do the same thing. If I can do the same thing for one kid, you know, it'll be all worth it because I know what it did for me. Not only did I teach, I uh, this could be funny, but I actually ended up teaching in the middle school, and the principal comes up to me and he says he was a big fan, and I had my kids in the same school, and he says, "Do you want to be you mind you want to be the wrestling coach?" And I said, "Sure, I'll be the wrestling coach." And I started swinging my arm, and I said, "I can go like this, like Hulk, Hulk used to go," because I didn't have an amateur background for wrestling, and he started laughing. And he thought about it for a while. He says, "What about a basketball coach?" And I was a pretty good basketball player, and I ended up uh, being the basketball coach. And I hadn't, played or done anything with basketball, but I remembered what I learned when I played, and I totally did it old school and taught old plays from when I played and invented my offense, my defense, and we in 15 years we went undefeated 2 years, and I had one losing season, and the kids loved playing for me. I worked them hard. I ran them. I got them in shape, and I used to come home and tell my wife, I'm not that great of a coach. I tell her, but those kids, you should see them in the game. They play their hearts out for me, and I was very successful. I did it for 15 years, and then I gave it up because I just got tired of coming home when it was dark.
Yeah.
And, a lot of time, you put a lot of time, and, 15 years is enough.
When people think of Tito Santana, what do you want them to remember?
I want them to remember that Tito Santana was a good man who cared about people, who cared about his family. And I just loved what I did, but I was able to move on and leave it behind. As a matter of fact, you were talking about you gave it up watching it. I haven't watched wrestling since I left myself. I couldn't tell you who's there, who's not there. It was just a part of my life, and it was a good part of my life, and it was good for me. But it's not for me anymore.
We all move on, right? We all move on to our next chapter. I'll tell you for me what Tito Santana meant to me, and if you're okay, if we go over a couple minutes.
Sure, yeah.
But what Tito Santana meant to me, so I came to Canada from Sri Lanka. We came in 83 as refugees. And at the time, when I came to Canada, obviously it's the first time I'm seeing white people, first time I'm seeing black people, first time all these different cultures. And there weren't a lot of brown kids, when I was growing up. Actually, at my school, there were two, me and my brother, right?
Right.
And as hard as life was, I took to a few things to get over some of the harshness of adjusting to this country. Sometimes it was bullying, sometimes it was racism, sometimes it was just not culturally fitting in and always being the outsider. So at the time in the 80s was a big time, I think, where everyone was looking for a hero. Everybody really looked at sports or music or movie stars, etc., for heroes. And I tell you, when I watched wrestling, Tito Santana for me was the closest that I could relate to. That was another brown person with a very positive influence and a great role model. And well, actually, there was you and the Iron Sheik, but the Iron Sheik was a bad guy, and who wants to be a bad guy, right?
Right.
even though I did like the character, but Tito Santana to me was somebody that we can get behind. I did also love a Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and all those guys, but you always were somebody that came across very positive and just a good hearted person throughout your iterations, whether you were the Matador, whether you were Strike Force, etc. People could see it in your eyes and in your soul. And it's such a great honor today to share this time with you, and I'm so grateful. So thank you for everything you've done as an entertainer, as an athlete, and mostly as a teacher, planting the seeds for others to achieve greatness. So I want to thank you for that, and it's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. As a matter of fact, today there was a kid that was one of my students who made contact with me through Facebook, and he still lives in the area, and he came by and he bought my book. I signed it for him, and I gave him 2 pictures for his wife. And he talked about what a difference I made for him in his life, and he's doing very well. And it's rewarding, and I care about people. And thank you for having me on. And I enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, this was great. I have one last surprise question for you, and the only right answer is Sri Lanka. Absolutely, Sri Lanka. And the question is, what country has the greatest cricket team?
Sri Lanka. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you so much. Arriba!
Tito Santana's story reminds us that fame doesn't have to define the rest of your life, and that walking away from the spotlight can sometimes be the bravest move of all. In a world where so many wrestlers struggled once the cheers faded, Tito chose discipline, humility, and service. He found a new ring, one filled with students, not opponents. And maybe that's the real victory. For me, his story isn't just about wrestling. It's about identity, purpose, and the quiet kind of success that doesn't make headlines, but leaves a legacy. Tito, thank you for showing us what it means to live after the glory. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it, leave a review, and follow My Life After for more conversations with people who've rebuilt their lives in unexpected ways. I'm Steve Joseph, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.